Hello everybody and welcome back to the wild world of modular synthesis. Today we'll be talking about randomness and how you can use it to make a more interesting patch. So it all starts with this little module here, the random module. So this, like many other modules, has a couple of uses packed into one. So the trigger output and then the shape outputs. So we'll start with the trigger output, which, as you can expect, is just a trigger that happens every so often randomly, as this is the random module. Now, the randomness comes in with this slider, the probability slider. So this can allow you to make it so that the trigger will only happen sometimes. So if we were to get a simple patch going here, ADSR, VCA, and VCO, and we patch this into the input, the envelope into the CV input, the output into the audio, turn the delay, the attack down, and then we attach the gate to the random trigger, and we select the correct audio device. We can hear at random times this is going to trigger. So what this module is set up to do right now is at 2 Hertz or 2 times per second, it's going to basically flip a coin here because we have a 50% probability. And if it comes up heads, this trigger will fire. And if it comes up tails, well, nothing will happen. The trigger will not fire. So that's one basic use of the random module. And of course, seeing as it's a modular synth, each of these sliders also has an input and a control voltage percent knob. So if we wanted the rate to change based on maybe some sawtooth output, we could put that in there, lower this frequency a little bit, up the control voltage. And so if we look at the saw wave here, that yellow line that we can see is what is determining how frequently this random is going to flip its coin, so to speak. Or we could automate the probability trigger while keeping the same rate. So if we say the rate is 10 times a second, and 10 hertz, and we would like it so that the trigger probability goes up as the yellow line goes up, we would turn that up. Let's turn that 100. Yeah, it creates some interesting, that is awful, huh? You can create some awful things with modular synthesis, but if you know how to do it right, you can create some pretty things. So yeah, that's the trigger and how you can automate it. but I find that using the shaped outputs comes in handy more often for what I usually do. So let's connect these up to the scope so that we can see what's going on. Alright, so we can see that they're all following the same basic shape. Some of them are a little bit different than others. Let's just isolate the red one. We'll disconnect everything else. So we can see this one, the stepped output, is what it says. It looks like a bunch of little steps. The linear output is exactly what it says. It's just a line that changes randomly and then goes to its new voltage every time the random fires correctly. The exponential, it's just linear right now, but if we change this shape slider that we'll get into later, that will change the shape here, so it'll be an exponential curve. And then we have smooth, which is a smoothed out line that just it's nice and smooth. It doesn't have any sharp edges. So we can use each of these in different ways to create different effects. And if we use this shape knob, we can see the step sizes get larger. This shape knob kind of does different things for different shapes. So it kind of makes them retain their shape but do it faster. And if that's moved all the way down to 0, each shape acts identically, just immediately going to its new value. So from here, we can turn that back up, maybe go to smooth, and that's pretty nice. And the final slider that we have yet to cover is the random spread. So this will determine how far each new random number will be from the current random value that it's at. So if we leave that up to 100, it could go anywhere from -10 to +10 volts, or no, 5. -5 to +5 volts. But as we turn this down, it will only vary so far from its current voltage. And that one can be useful if you want slow changes, but we'll leave that at 100 because I think that's more interesting. So let's see what happens when we hook up the trigger output here to the gate. And since we have probability at 100, this is just going to be basically a 2 Hz clock. It'll just trigger every time. And if we hook up the octave to the smooth here, okay, so that's interesting. That's a bit more range than we want. So this would be a good time to introduce a very useful module called the voltage scaler. So if you've ever done programming before, or math, and you know about the map function where you take some domain and you map it linearly to a range. That's what this does. So we know that our random voltage is going to be anywhere from -5 to +5 volts, but we would like to scale it so that it's anywhere from -1 to 1 volts. Now if we run this through our scaler, and we can see here on the scope that the yellow line is just kind of a shrunken down, a scaled down version of the red line. So putting that into the pitch input of our oscillator and turning up the VCA, we can hear that it's not jumping 10 octaves at once now. It's just jumping 5. And if we wanted some more gradual changes, we could either turn the random spread down, or what I would prefer to do is turn the clock rate down. And since we're doing that, we turned the clock rate to 0.1 hertz. It's only going to trigger every 10 seconds. So what we could do is maybe turn up the delay here. Turn up the release, since it's a trigger and not a gate. Something like that, maybe. Or if we turn this down a bit, maybe get rid of the envelope altogether. And now we have a siren. So this could be some interesting way to get movement in your patch, especially if you had maybe another oscillator above it, and then another above that, up the octave. And if we put in a switch, maybe just a simple 2 switch with the sine waves as the inputs. Oh no, we want a voltage controlled 2 switch, a VC switch with the sine waves as the inputs. No, not a switch. Yes, a sequencer. And this is really the process of modular synthesis, trying things, seeing what might be interesting. We actually do want to switch, just not the CV switch. An 8-to-1 switch, taking each of these as the input. We would want some clock. Yeah, we'd hook that up there, set the length to 2, set the output of this. Let's get a CV mix. Put that into N1, put the mix there. Now you really got something scary. Now you're going to make people think that something's wrong. And if we put... yeah, you get some pretty strange results. For sure. And like I said before, this is just kind of what you do. Just see what works, see what doesn't. And of course, we wouldn't have to go with smooth. We could go with any of these. Maybe turn the shape up. Now that's awful. Okay. Oh. Okay. Yeah, make sure to use your voltage scaled input. There we go. Now we don't have such range here. And what if we turn this up? And turn the shape back. And turn up the clock rate. Now it's not great, it's not very pretty, but it is random. And of course, you could use randomness in other ways, kind of how we did in the first demonstration, showing that you could use it to trigger some kind of event to happen. So we'll go ahead and move to another project file that showcases that in a more refined way. So this is an example of a patch that uses randomness, both the random trigger, although it wouldn't have to because this is of probability 100. But it does use this to set sort of a base note that we will build chords on top of. So what we're doing here is, well, we'll use this random kind of as a clock, and its rate slider is being affected by this low frequency oscillator. So we can see it's just slowing down and speeding up, and then slowing down again, speeding up again. And that trigger is acting as the clock for a sequencer, which is just an arpeggio of a minor chord. It's just used in that way. But it also has a trigger output going to this pulse divider. So every 24 pulses, this random will be triggered, and its step output will be fed into this quantizer to change like the bass note, and we will mix that note with the arpeggio notes and use a little bit of something called a slew limiter to make them a little bit more smooth in their transitions. If we didn't use that, it would sound like this. It's a subtle difference. And that, of course, goes to the pitch of an oscillator, and that sine wave goes through a bit of a filter that's changed as well by this same LFO. So it's all kind of connected. And this voltage controlled amplifier is controlled by the ADSR, which is gated from the gate mod, which gets its trigger from the sequencer. So everything's kind of interconnected here. And with this LFO hooking up to both the random's rate and the filter's cutoff frequency does is make the more frequent notes easier to hear. They come through the filter more. So when the notes happen more often, you can hear them better. So they kind of fade in and out as they get faster and slower. And they go through a delay, which just adds an echo. And there's this voltage-controlled oscillator, which is just a drone in the background. And these are both mixed and sent to the audio. So this is an example of how randomness can be used to create kind of an interesting soundscape, less of a song and more of just something to kind of put in the background. So yeah, that's basically how random module work. How the random module works. In VCV Rack, there's a lot of different uses for it. You can have the trigger happen with certain probability, or you can just have some random voltage from a random shape. And yeah, so hope you learned something about the random trigger and how to use it. And if you have any module suggestions, modules you think I should cover, leave a comment down below, and see you next time.